Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming a true champion of the United States-Israel relationship, my friend and Senator, Senator Robert Menendez.
Buenos días, un placer darle la bienvenida a todos ustedes aquí, a la capital de la nación, en esta convención de esos que son pro Israel y pro los Estados Unidos. Thank you very much. For those of you who are terrorized, I might continue for the next few minutes in Spanish. Let me thank my dear friend Lonnie Kaplan for his gracious introduction. I'm honored to speak to so many with whom I have stood shoulder to shoulder for so long, sometimes against the odds, often against the broader international community, and sometimes at our own political peril. But we have always stood together when it comes to the security of the state of Israel, and it is one of the hallmarks of this organization. I'm especially honored this morning to share the stage with Prime Minister Netanyahu, a powerful voice for a strong, secure, and democratic Israel. He is the personification of the sentiment John Kennedy once expressed when he said, "Israel was not created in order to disappear. Israel will endure and flourish. It is the child of hope and the home of the brave. It carries the shield of democracy and it honors the sword of freedom." Like Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu was certainly not created to disappear. And I know with the shield of democracy in one hand and the sword of freedom in the other, he will inform and inspire us as he always has. One other reflection. I am proud to appear before AIPAC as the manifestation of what participatory democracy is all about, citizens seeking to petition their government. So when some criticize your motives, I would simply remind them of the first three words of the preamble of the Constitution of the United States that says, we the people, and that's who you all are. When I addressed this forum last year, I said that Israel and the United States have always agreed on the strategic imperative that Israel be able to defend itself no matter what blooms from the shifting sands of the Arab Spring. Now, 1 year later, I look at the world and I am deeply concerned. The spread of radical Islamic fundamentalism from the Hindu Kush to the Maghreb and across what King Abdullah called the Shia Crescent, the arc of unrest from the Gulf to the Mediterranean, has become a long winter of discontent that threatens an entire region and strengthens the worst players in the region. And it makes the regional and geopolitical outcome less predictable and increasingly dangerous for Israel and the United States. Israel is in an increasingly dangerous, unstable, and predictable neighborhood, making the strategic partnership with the United States even more imperative. Together, we are a pillar of regional stability. Together, we are shining examples of democratic values and the benefits a strategically deep partnership can bring. Together, Israel and the United States have much more than military allies. We have collaborated on science and technology, economic and agricultural issues, as well as on our security. But when it comes to military cooperation between our two nations, I'm proud to continue to take our security relationship with Israel to unprecedented levels. From the Iron Dome system that protects Israel from rocket attacks to rigorously ensuring Israel's qualitative military edge, all of us are safer and more secure because of that strategic relationship. I have worked on Iran's nuclear issues for 21 years, starting when I was a member of the House, when I found out that the United States was sending voluntary contributions to the International Atomic Energy Administration, whose voluntary contributions above our membership dues were going to do what? to create operational capacity at the Bushehr nuclear facility, not in the national interest of the United States, not in the national interest of the State of Israel. For a decade, I was told that my concerns had no legitimate basis, that Iran would never be able to bring the Bushehr plant online, and that Iran's nuclear activities were not the most major concern. History has shown us that those assessments about Iran's abilities and intentions were simply wrong then, and I believe they are wrong today. If past is prologue, I'm skeptical of Iran keeping its promises. So let me give you my assessment of the way forward from the joint plan of action agreed to by the members of the P5+1 in Iran, and what we should expect before we move from an interim to a final comprehensive agreement that verifiably, and we would hope permanently, dismantles Iran's nuclear weapon program. As I have said repeatedly, I support a diplomatic progress program to get us to a deal. However, this diplomatic process must be reinforced by continuous international commitment to sanctions regime against Iran. It is clear that only intense, punishing economic pressure influences Iranian leaders. So we must keep the pressure on. We must not let them obstruct, and we can't let them obfuscate and delay their way to dismantling the sanctions that we have worked together to build, to bring them to the table, to get to the point of making sure they never have the ability to create one nuclear bomb. I certainly will continue to do all I can to make sure we do not dismantle the sanctions regime until and unless Iran dismantles their ability to create even one bomb. What troubles me, and what I believe troubles many of you, is that the international community seems to want any deal more than it wants a good deal. Let's understand that we need to ensure that Iran cannot delay away sanctions while they retain the ability to resume their weapons program at any time. The longer we let them delay, the swifter their research and development brings new, more powerful centrifuges, and the closer they get to breakout capability. And it is that capability that must be dismantled, period. Then we would have a good deal. We cannot let the international sanctions regime unravel before we have that better deal that verifiably dismantles Iran's ability to produce highly enriched uranium, a deal that fully addresses the weaponization aspects of Iran's nuclear program. The problem is that the mere possibility that sanctions might be lifted has already brought a rush of business delegations to Tehran. So let me be clear, I support the administration's diplomatic efforts. I've always supported a two-track policy of diplomacy and sanctions. But at the same time, I am convinced that we should only relieve pressure on Iran in exchange for verifiable concessions that will dismantle Iran's illicit nuclear program. And in my view, Iran's strategy is to use these negotiations to mothball its nuclear infrastructure program just long enough to undo the international sanctions regime. Iran is insisting on keeping core elements of its program: enrichment, the Iraq heavy water reactor, the underground Fordo facility, the Parchin military complex. And while they may be subject to safeguards so that they can satisfy the international community in the short run, if they are allowed to retain their core infrastructure, they could revive their program sometime in the future. Bottom line, if they get their way, they dismantle virtually nothing. And we got the sanctions that are the one reason the Iranians are at the table at all. The fact is, Iran is simply looking to lock the door on its nuclear weapons program, and should they walk away later from the deal, as they have in the past, they can simply unlock the door and continue their nuclear weapons program from where they are today. And if that sounds familiar, it should. It sounds a lot like North Korea. And let's not forget that despite diplomatic entreaties to the Iranians in recent years, where hands were extended and secret talks were pursued, Iran has grown its support and advocacy for terror. The history of Iranian terror against U.S. citizens and interests is lengthy, robust, and grounded in the view that the United States is the great Satan. Its funding and support of Hezbollah that has carried out attacks against American interests continues. 241 American servicemen died in the 1983 Marine Corps barracks bombing in Lebanon, 19 in the Khobar Towers bombing in Saudi Arabia. In recent years, we've traced responsibility for lethal actions against American troops in Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as the planned attack on the Saudi ambassador in a Washington restaurant in 2011, all to Iran. Today, Iran is actively sponsoring the proxy war in Syria, spending money, weapons, and fighters every day. Simultaneously, it is sponsoring attacks against Sunnis in Iraq and promoting regional sectarian violence that could easily result in a broader regional conflict. Make no mistake, while they are smiling at our negotiators across the table, they are plotting in the back room. With all of this in mind, I believe in the wisdom of the prospective sanctions that I have proposed. I believe in the lessons of history that tell us Iran cannot be trusted to live up to its word without external pressure. I believe that an insurance policy that guards against Iranian obfuscation and deception is the best way forward. The fact is, Iran's nuclear aspirations did not materialize overnight. Make no mistake, Iran views developing a nuclear capability as fundamental to its existence. It sees the development of nuclear weapons as part of a regional hegemonic strategy to make Tehran the center of power throughout the region. That is why our allies and partners in the region, not just Israelis, but Emiratis and Saudis and others, are so skeptical and so concerned. So while I welcome diplomatic efforts, and I share the hope that the administration can achieve a final comprehensive agreement that eliminates this threat to global peace and security, I am deeply, deeply skeptical based upon these 21 years of experience. At a minimum, we need to send a message to Iran that our patience is not unlimited, and a message to the international community that sanctions regime has not weakened, and this is not an opportunity to re-engage with Tehran. And in my view, it's time to put Iranian rhetoric to the test. If we are to take President Rouhani's word that he said in Davos that Iran does not seek nuclear weapons, if that's true, then the Iranian government should not have any problems with the obvious follow-up to that claim, starting with the verifiable dismantling of its illicit nuclear infrastructure. That is all the sanctions legislation seeks. I don't believe we should settle for anything less. Do any of you believe we should settle for anything less? So let me close by saying at the end of the day, we cannot know what the future will hold. We do not know what will bloom from the shifting sands of the Middle East. But what we do know, what we must understand, is that the United States must be the one to step up to help to protect the Israeli people and counter the threat that would be posed by a nuclear Iran. I have said many times before and will repeat here again, the Holocaust was the most sinister possible reminder that the Jewish population in exile was in constant jeopardy. It was a definitive argument that anti-Semitism could appear anywhere, and its horrors galvanized international support for the State of Israel. But while the Shoah may have a central role in Israel's identity, it is not the reason behind its founding, and it is not the main reason for its existence. The modern establishment of the State of Israel has long and deep roots going back to the times of Abraham and Sarah. There is no denying the Jewish people a legitimate right to live in peace and security in a homeland to which they have a connection for thousands of years. And that has not changed through the centuries. Too often,